thank you, Ithaca College community, and welcome back from spring break, although I use that term loosely because it's not quite spring out there. Matter of fact, while you were gone, we had temperatures plummeting below 0, and tonight they'll be probably in the teens. It's pretty important for you to know, maybe surprising for you to know, that every single night you were away, tonight, every single night of the year, there are some of our neighbors, some community members, who are out in the cold without shelter, who are homeless. Now, this is a novel idea in a community that you think is enlightened and maybe bucolic because it's upstate New York and farming community, but it's a reality. And I'm going to be taking you through a journey. Hopefully you can engage with this journey and tell your friends about it, about how you can end homelessness in Tompkins County. But first I'd like to introduce you to one of our neighbors. This is Tyler. I met Tyler about 1 year ago in this same time of year. And when we crossed paths, he was wearing 5 layers of clothes. He'd been wearing those clothes for about 5 days because the winter winds were whipping. He was walking on the commons, staying in the Wegmans bus shelter to try to stay warm. And thankfully, the residence where I work, which is the Rescue Mission Court Street Place around the corner from Ithaca Bakery downtown, had an open room. We were able to move Tyler in, and that night he had his first warm sleep for quite a few nights. I thought for sure Tyler would be sleeping in the next day since he had been walking the streets, but he had an address. And having that address, he got up, he went out, he looked for a job, and within 24 hours, he applied at Agway, which was hiring for a spring rush, and the next day he was able to start stocking shelves for spring gardening supplies. Here's one person, one resource added room, one barrier removed, an address, and actually a life changed. And this is where you can come in. What we've done today in other TEDx talks, we've learned about astrophysics and the frontier there, or underwater wheelchair, a frontier there. We've learned about showing our vulnerability. Today, I'd like to take you on a journey into our own selves, what it takes to make a difference in Tompkins County. How can we, how can you, how can I end homelessness in Tompkins County? And if anything you leave with, I'd like to leave you with 3 points, and hopefully, again, you can write it in the back of your books or you can share it with your friends or neighbors. These 3 points are very clear. One is that you need to know that homelessness is real in Tompkins County. There are probably, in any one night, approximately 100 people who are homeless or without shelter or in transitional shelter in our community. Know that homelessness can be ended in Tompkins County. There actually is a plan to end homelessness, and it involves each one of us getting involved. And probably more surprisingly, the path to ending homelessness actually takes us inside, looking inside ourselves, facing our fears, being willing to show our vulnerability, notice our common humanity, and be real with each other, and then take steps to notice where we can get involved, what steps we can take to end homelessness. Here are some other residents that have walked through our doors. Maybe you've actually crossed paths with them. You maybe don't know it, but they're members of our community. Take a minute and look. This is our common humanity that you can see, possibly look and see ourselves in each of these neighbors. These are people in the community who are working, who are moving towards their goals. They have stories, they have journeys, they're taking steps. And if I had to say one thing, I would say we're all on a journey together. The outcome of this journey in Tompkins County is actually at this point unknown. The outcome will depend on each of us. This is a quick map of Tompkins County, and here in Tompkins County we have about 100,000 people. And as I mentioned, the numbers of people who are homeless in any one night in Tompkins County are between 50 and 100. And how do we know that number? Fortunately, there's a network of human service agencies known as the Human Services Coalition that keeps track and has kept track for about 20 years of shelter bed nights. These are emergency shelters, whether it's domestic violence or just the local emergency shelter. And you can see, if you look closely at 2006, that the high point was about 16,000 shelter bed nights. Do the math per days of the year, and it comes out to about 50 people are homeless and in shelter beds in 2006. Thankfully, through the consortium of agencies working together and people, hopefully like you in the future, that number has gone down to about 4,700 in 2013, and hopefully we can keep making progress. Another way that we know how many people might be homeless in Tompkins County, and we think it probably is an undercount, is that one day of the year, us and other communities across the country go out in the community and do what's called a point-in-time count, to actually talk to agencies, talk to people in the know in their communities who might be homeless on that particular 24-hour period. And These slides are of the area known as the Jungle, which was mentioned in the intro. The Jungle is an encampment behind Wegmans, pretty much about 1.25 miles from here, where for about almost 80 years, as people can determine, there's been a homeless encampment where people actually are supporting each other in their homelessness, kind of forming a sense of community by the railroad tracks and kind of in some industrial land. And you'll see a cross here in the right-hand slide, and that indeed means, and I wanted to take a moment and share, that homelessness actually can result in death. And as it was mentioned in the introduction, I'd like to dedicate this talk to Rick Sherman, who passed away from fire burns after his tent went up in flames, and the next day he passed away, probably because he was trying to keep himself warm this past December. So this point in time count, we actually do go out in the community to places like the Jungle. We take the count of people. This is the Ithaca shelter run by the Rescue Mission. And we also go to other places, 24-hour laundromats, into restaurants, into bars. I was out on January 30th of this year. That was an evening of the point in time count, going into firehouses. And interestingly enough, most firefighters know their community really well and can tell you who's going through a challenge or a struggle. Or I went into a school that was having an overnight slumber party with their elementary students, and the family liaisons know who in the community might be homeless or needing shelter. And so in 2013, we were able to determine at that moment probably about 85 people were homeless, and in 2014, this year, it was 91. And beyond the numbers of homelessness, it's important to look at what might be the causes of homelessness, particularly here in upstate New York. I would say certainly the economy plays a great factor. If you lose your job, you may not be able to pay your rent, and certain circumstances may put you out in the street. But let's look a little bit deeper. As I mentioned with Tyler, a little bit of lack of resource or a barrier being in the way. And so even beneath that, let's look at what may cause people to not connect with their neighbors, you and I. It may be lack of a sense of isolation, or it might be a sense of hopelessness. And I'd like you to take a moment and think about when you felt a dark night of the soul, or when you felt night fears, and you feel the world closing in on you. How has it felt, how real that feels? And that's a tiny bit of hopelessness that people might be feeling in some of these circumstances. This is a way that we can look inside and cross that barrier of our common humanity, and then possibly reach out and figure out how we can make a contribution. You've seen people by the roads in Tompkins County flashing a sign, hungry, homeless. Take a moment and look inside yourself. What kinds of feelings come up? Is it that you have some fears? Maybe if I reach out, I'll be assaulted. Maybe you have some ambivalence. Maybe you have some guilt or hesitation. These are all real. These are all very important to pay attention to, because from those places, noticing our vulnerability, noticing our fears, paying attention to them, then we can be real with each other and real with our neighbors in the community. Here's other faces of people in Tompkins County and in our region who have been moving out of homelessness. And you can see, again, looking in these faces, men, women, children, seniors, that people actually do have a lot of hope. And thankfully, in Tompkins County, there are members of our community who have been offering hope across the decades. There is an organization in our community known as Kitchen Cupboard, which was formed 40 years ago, and there's a woman named Joan Barber who's been volunteering for that organization for 40 years. It's simply a food pantry, but she's still doing it. I talked to her just the other day, and those kinds of contributions by community members are ways that we can show that we care. Others in the community have taken upon themselves to empty this area known as the Jungle. For about 2 years, they actually developed relationships, went in, brought pizza, brought water, and they were able to develop relationships, understand what some of the needs were, and find unique shelter opportunities. And from January of 2013 until May of 2013, the Jungle was actually empty. Some of the people who were involved in that are Carmen Guidi here in the red sweatshirt, Barry Siegel in the hat, and Steve Chapman, my colleague who works for Rescue Mission. During that time when the Jungle was actually empty, we had many volunteers actually go into the Jungle and remove pallets and other building materials so as not to entice people back into that community. So there is a sense of hope in Tompkins County that we can make a difference. There is something called the Continuum of Care in Tompkins County, again, run by the Human Services Coalition, this consortium of organizations, and they look at the gaps in services and the needs, and they try to find funding for those to fill them. One of the ways that they've been able to do this is share information across organizations. And so the Tompkins County Legislature, about 8 years ago, looked at the issue of affordable housing in general. And they, with Cornell and the City of Ithaca, decided to pledge $400,000 a year for 6 years. It's almost $250,000 to invest in affordable housing and sustain affordable housing in our community. Other ways the Continuum of Care Committee has been involved in filling gaps is since 1991, we've actually had a youth outreach component of a program called Learning Web, youth on the street in need who are homeless. And more recently, funding's been able to be allocated for teens to find apartments because teens typically can't sign leases. The agency signs the lease, the teens get support and work towards their goals. Other ways that we've gained momentum in our community is single room occupancy numbers have increased. This is, normally you may not be able to afford an apartment by yourself, but this is maybe a subsidized apartment where 40 new apartments were available in the last 3 years. So you can see the sense of momentum building. Those numbers coming down from 16,000 to 4,700 over a period of about 7 years. This is next to Joe's Restaurant. You've seen this green copper-sided building going up. This is Magnolia House. It's going to be run by Tompkins Community Action, meeting the needs of another gap in our community, women and children having transitional supportive housing, and this will have 14 units in it, hopefully opening later this spring. So we can see that many organizations are coordinating their services. This is the residence where I work. It's called Rescue Mission Court Street Place, and Barry Siegel had an inspiration to convert this building with 200 volunteers, 2,000 volunteer hours, and now there are 10 individual rooms with supportive staff to help men transition from homelessness to stability in the community. And you may have heard that last fall in Newfield, Carmen Guidi, the fellow who was in the red sweatshirt, also was inspired, and he and many other people in the community raised over $100,000. They built 6 cottages in Newfield on land that he donated, and they hope to build 12 more cottages with a community center and supportive staff. And here is one of the most important things you need to know is that there actually is a plan to end homelessness. In October of 2011, that Continuum of Care Committee formed a 10-year plan to end homelessness, and the very first element of that plan is to educate the community about the need and educate the community about how every single person can get involved. So your being here today is helping us meet that goal. Thank you very much. All these different agencies in Tompkins County, this is our particular mission statement, but all of them could fall under this umbrella: sharing hope, ending hunger and homelessness, changing lives, strengthening community, one person at a time. This is through building relationships, just like those going into the jungle, building relationships, finding alternative housing. What are the kinds of things that we each can do? We could simply look inside ourselves, face our fears, but then from that point, what kinds of contributions can we make? If we are interested in sewing, maybe we could make a quilt for someone to be on a bed and they can take it with them as they transition out of homelessness and into their own apartment. Maybe you could have a clothing drive. Very simply, the clothing can be donated to a local thrift store and some of the profits will actually stay in the community. You could watch your neighbors' children as they go out and look for a job. The faith community, some of them have walked beside someone or a family who've been homeless for up to 20 years as they go through their ups and downs in life. There's many ways that each of us can get involved. They tend to boil down to how do we build relationships, even if it's in a small way. Not everyone can do everything, but everyone can indeed do something. We have a local soup kitchen known as Loaves and Fishes. This is a perfect way to get involved in terms of just developing relationships, sitting down with one of our neighbors who may be going through transition and lending your support and building that relationship. Ultimately, we each have a role in Tompkins County to be a catalyst for that kind of life change. And let me share a story of another resident who has come through our doors here at Rescue Mission Court Street Place. This fellow came to us last June after about 16 years in federal prison, so you can imagine how shocking that would be to come to world on the outside. And he came motivated with 3 different goals. One was to reconnect with his family, who were about an hour away, and his young people, when he'd gone into prison, were now in their 20s. The other was to get a job so he wouldn't be dependent on social services. And the third was to actually move out into his own independent apartment. Thankfully, over that period of time, several months, he was able to march towards each of those goals with support, some ups and downs. He had some challenges with his roommate and those kinds of things. But on November 1st, he actually did move out into his own apartment. And with community member donations, he was able to get furniture, household items, and it felt really rewarding to have him reach that goal, be on his own in an apartment in our community. One of the things that he was not able to do was to save for the security deposit. So one community member forwarded a loan to him, and he was able to come back after November 1st every few weeks and pay off that security deposit. So he actually comes to Rescue Mission and does that. Toward about a month later, we had a restaurant dinner for residents of Court Street Place, and he was able to join us. And in that restaurant, somewhat of a public place, he stood up and actually read a poem, Robert Frost's The Road Less Traveled. It was very heart-rending because he was able to say, this poem is so meaningful to me because I taken the road less traveled. It took some courage, and I hope that each of you, which were his previous housemates, could make that same kind of journey. And he kept making those payments on the security deposit, and he had finished making the payments. After about a month, he actually stopped back in at the residence, and I said, great to see you, how is life going? And he updated me, but he reached into his back pocket and he pulled out his wallet, and he actually took out a few 20s, $120 to be exact, and he said, I just got paid my tax return, and I'd like to return 1/10 of it to the rescue mission. This is paying it forward. I'd like people's lives to change, and his life was changed and transformed. Each of us is on a journey, and the goal in our community is indeed a journey. I believe that this can be attained if each one of us looks inside, faces our fears, and indeed makes progress towards what we can do individually to end homelessness in Tompkins County. So I talked about that journey, not knowing the outcome, and yet being involved is indeed what I think that outcome can be. So if I could leave you with one last thought, I would say that anytime you encounter someone in transition, someone who might be formerly viewed as the other or we and they, take a moment to think and notice that each person, whether it's a he or a she, is actually you and me. And may Tompkins County continue to become a place where each person can find a home. Thank you.